Hey guys. All right, so I'm Helena. I'm a photographer based here in San Francisco, California. You guys should come up. Have a seat. Okay, so I'm curious how many of you out there have heard of the Techies project? Yes. Awesome. Okay, for those of you who haven't, it's okay. And I wanted to provide a little bit of context for why we're here. Am I miking okay? Am I moving in? Okay, great. Okay, so over the years, when you've heard the word techie, what comes to mind? Just think about it. For many, it's probably someone like this. He was probably exposed to technology at a very early age, either through his parents or his early education. He probably went to Stanford. He probably is working at Google or Facebook or Uber or Airbnb, or maybe he's a startup CEO. And according to this internet search of startup CEO, he is probably white, male, and somewhere between 20 and 40. The story and image of this techie is celebrated over and over and over. You see him in the press, you see him winning awards, you see him raising venture capital. You're loving this. But there's another story in tech that is not being told. It is of another kind of techie. They do not come from privilege. They probably didn't go to Ivy League schools. Maybe they came from poverty or rough homes. They probably didn't have access to technology in early childhood. But when they discovered it, they worked against all odds to get to Silicon Valley. They overcame crazy obstacles and made careers for themselves, despite people telling them they couldn't. They are also now working at Facebook and Google and Uber and Airbnb and running companies and building the products that we love. But we don't really hear about them. Their stories are not usually heard or celebrated. They also happen to be hired less, paid less, promoted less, and funded less than that first kind of techie. They experience bias, discrimination, and harassment based on their gender, race, age, or sexuality, or simply not being a culture fit for the Valley. Also, tech is in a weird place right now. In 2016, the word techie is not being met with the same admiration it once had. The term has become loaded, even derogatory. It is a word that has become synonymous with privilege and greed. Within the industry, conversations around equality, diversity, and inclusion have risen to a boil. At the same time, many in the industry view these issues with skepticism or dismiss them altogether. They believe tech is a meritocracy, and if you can't figure out how to benefit from it, that is a fault of your own. So a few months ago, I decided to do a project exploring all of this. In the first 3 months of 2016, I set out to collect the stories of 100 people in the tech industry. I focused on folks whose stories are less told, those of women, people of color, LGBT, over 50, disabled, and so on. I wanted to learn where they come from, the obstacles they overcame to get here, the hardships they continue to face in the industry day to day, and why they choose to stay. I put a call for subjects out on Medium, and over 500 people applied in 2 weeks. 3 months and over 1,000 hours of work later, the result was the Techies project. Of the 100 people I interviewed and photographed, 70 were women and 59 were people of color. 25 were LGBT, 23 were immigrants, 18 grew up in poverty. Most of these folks have never been in the press, and many were sharing their experiences for the first time ever. And I have 4 folks today here from the project. Chanpory Rith, first guy here on the right, who grew up in West Oakland after immigrating as a refugee of war during the Cambodian Civil War. He spent his childhood in a small 1-bedroom apartment for a family of 7 on welfare and food stamps in West Oakland. Eventually, he made his way to art school via scholarships and loans, studied graphic design, and ended up in tech. He's known for designing Gmail for iOS at Google when it was still a 20% project, and now he's building his own startup, Mixmax. Anna Arriola, who has been hailed as a provocateur and uniter, creative leader and craftswoman with projects she's designed ranging from Sony's PlayStation 4, the original Apple iPhone UX frameworks, to heirloom electronics. Georgiana, or Anna as her friends call her, currently splits her time between San Francisco, Tokyo, and Kyoto, where she runs her bespoke skunkworks product design consultancy, Minimalisms. During Anna's tenure with Sony, Georgiana was directly responsible for establishing, defining, and driving Sony's common UX across all 5 screens, known as Genome, from Bravia 4K, Xperia, to Vita, ending with the PlayStation 4 console and connected experiences. As a transgender woman, Anna is a staunch advocate for LGBTQ entrepreneurs and creatives, both here throughout the Bay Area and in Japan, working to end bro culture in both the technology and venture communities. Jeany No, a first-generation Vietnamese American who, despite her parents' best attempt at pushing her into traditionally successful career paths, left her home at 17, eventually hustled her way back to San Francisco, and despite never getting a design degree, now works as a designer at Airbnb. And Tim Quirino, who was born in the Philippines and moved to New Jersey when he was 9, got his start designing merch for bands like Fall Out Boy, was later known for more or less creating the tech scene in Philadelphia, and eventually ended up in Menlo Park, where he created Facebook Music. He's still at Facebook now, working as a product designer on live video. So I'm gonna ask these guys a few questions, and we're also gonna open it up while we're doing this on Slack. So if you have any questions, ask them on Slack right now, and we'll somehow receive them and answer them. And you can just generally ask the whole group, or you can ask an individual person. We're just gonna wing it and see how this goes. Okay, so I'm gonna take a seat, but to start, I would love you guys to go down the line and introduce yourself again, so people remember, and just share what motivated you guys to be a part of a project like this.
Hi, I'm Chanpory, and I think my motivation was partly because a lot of, coming into work, I compartmentalize a lot of my experience that does not quite fit in with the dominant culture. I try to blend in many ways, and I felt like it was just an opportunity to share that experience of, that people don't really know a lot about.
Hi everyone, I'm on Arriola. It was an awesome opportunity to meet all the individuals that were part of the project, and Helena, thank you so much for organizing it again. It was a launchpad for myself, for me to make my transition, but also having been an entrepreneur with my own company, Minimalisms, for the last 4.5 years, after leaving Sony, I noticed that the bro culture up and down Sand Hill Road, not just Sand Hill, but in Boston, in New York, in Los Angeles, is way too pervasive than it needs to be. And that's just like if you're straight trying to raise capital, let alone being part of LGBTQ. And I'm doing what I can now, both within the startup space as well as Fortune 500 companies, to really sort of be that advocate, that voice for inclusion and diversity. Myself, being who I am, but also being Latino, Danish, and Swedish, and my kids were Latino, Danish, Swedish, and Japanese. So just trying to do what I can to help out.
I'm Jeany. For me, I saw the opportunity, and I had been telling my story to people, I guess intimately, just letting them know about myself. And you realize, when you talk to people and get to know them, you realize your story is a little different from everyone else. And I, thought, why not share it? I have younger siblings or younger cousins that kind of look up to me, but at the same time, are in following my footsteps in a way. I'm first generation American, and I have cousins who are going through the same thing, and I wanted to write this story to kind of talk to them about it in a way, and open up a conversation to share with them. And I also wanted to share with everyone else this story and just connect.
I heard I'm Tim Quirino, and apparently I used to design merch for Fall Out Boy. I actually heard about this project through a mutual friend, and I think I heard about it pretty late after the call for entries. Got waitlisted, so I didn't really get my hopes up, but then I got an email from Helena a couple weeks later saying, hey, actually we had a few people back out, and here's your chance to tell your story. And that got me really thinking about what I wanted to talk about. It was a time in my life where I realized that I wasn't being vulnerable at all with anyone. I was pushing my parents away because I didn't feel comfortable with our relationship. I had just come out of a really long and hard breakup, and a lot of my friends just knew part of who I was. So this was kind of the first time I'd ever told the entirety of my story. And it was very cathartic.
Cool. Chanpory, I have a question for you. I'm curious, though I already know, what it's like straddling communities that you're a part of, some of which are privileged and some of which are less privileged, particularly as a queer man of color in San Francisco, someone who grew up in poverty in West Oakland and is now on the other side as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. Like, what is it like straddling those different communities as someone who is part of all of those communities?
I think it's a little bit exhausting, I guess is what I would say, because you have to alter your identity in each of these different contexts. So, you know, when I hang out with my tech friends and, you know, eating at like super nice restaurants and like, you know, there's like $5 toast and things like that, you know, you are like, you know, you sort of like embody that sort of like bouginess. But then I go home, you know, my family still lives in Oakland, and, you know, they're like, the world is just so different, you know. They're struggling with getting healthcare, finding a job, just basic survival skills. And so I feel like, you know, even just like those two worlds, it just gets really, really hard to sort of reconcile those two in your head. And then there's also just like being in the you know, the queer community as well. You know, my partner is you know, he was doing a lot of dance and performance. That community is getting pushed out, and a lot of that is blamed on technology. So it's sort of like having the different conversations, like at home with my partner and with my family, and then like, you know, with my tech friends and things like that. It's just, it gets really, I think for me, it's very exhausting, because it's just like, you just have to adjust so much all the time.
Anna, you have talked to me about your passion for authenticity in design. And I'm curious about, you know, your life experience and all of your work experience and how that has fed into making this such a priority for you. And I'm curious to know what companies or brands you feel like are doing a great job of that and what you would like to see improve.
Sure. I think I've been embracing authenticity. I really, I guess, discovered what real authenticity was from a product's perspective in the last 5 years. My last two companies that I founded were hardware startups, very high-end startups that were dealing with essentially a woman's bangle bracelet that was decoupled from being tethered, a 3G network with sapphire crystal and ceramic housing, to most recently an authentic heirloom electronic. And during the exploration of the color material finishing that I was seeking to design these particular products, I had the chance to come across really amazing now friends from Kyoto, people that have been working in the craftsperson world for 19, 18, and 13 generations. It was there where I really discovered what authenticity meant to me, that you could build a product, and Jesse spoke about this a little bit earlier about the carrot. I want to be a carrot too, by the way. You know, you're essentially creating a longevity around an heirloom object. And these people that have tea canisters and baskets and kimono fabric that have lasted hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, that really puts everything in perspective that we make that typically ends up at the top of a e-waste pile every 2 years. And so while I was studying this with my own hardware startups, post-Sony, and building my products and my companies, I started asking myself, well, who am I? Am I authentic about this as well? And that's when I really dug deep and fortunately came across the Techies project about myself being authentic to who I am, who I always have been, but having the courage and, as I like to say, just like starting a company, jumping off the edge of a cliff, but knowing that your friends and your loved ones have you and they support you, but also knowing you got your squirrel suit on too and you're just gonna open your arms up and soar. So authenticity is really important for all of us, I think. Whether you're working within pushing pixels around on the screen, making sure that that delivery, that experience and expression that you're trying to deliver in your application is delightful, memorable most of all, as well as making something that you'll be able to pass down generationally, whether it be a cardboard box, a future completely tethered experience that may live within your home. Just take that into mind. Always do what you believe is going to be the right thing to do. Don't do what you think the market is telling you to do, and definitely don't do what the VC necessarily is telling you to do, because they're a bit schizo. They change your mind quite a bit. But to me, that's really what authenticity is about.
Cool. Jeany, you've talked about self-definition and the pressures of defining yourself by your parents and society, where you come from, etc. Can you share a bit of that process of figuring that out for yourself and tips for others who may be facing the same battles with defining yourself?
Yeah. So, I mean, my parents are immigrants. I'm first generation American. I was born here. And like, they had their American dream of like what it's meant to succeed. I mean, they spent their entire lives through struggle, and they came here and like wanted me to have the best future and career. And so like growing up, they like kind of like threw me like at the Velcro wall of things to do, and like growing up and like the right career, yeah, like here are all the things, whatever sticks, sticks, yeah. So like they pushed for very traditional careers, like doctor or lawyer, whatever, like, you know, had a high pay raise. But what I always wanted to do was be an artist. Like I had been graphic designing since I was a kid, like Neopets pages and seems like, yeah. Throwing an app idea out there, if we can get Neopets on mobile. I mean, I was doing that on my own for a while, but you know, they kind of like put it down, like, oh, like an arts career will not get you anywhere. You're going to be a caricature artist on the streets. So I left home like at 17. I just kind of like on weird terms with my parents, just kind of left, and like worked my way through school and college, like just freelancing and like doing my own thing, putting myself through school and just trying to get out here. I mean, I was born and raised here, but I had moved to Texas and I wanted to come back really bad, and I knew like this was where design was, or like this was where tech was, and I wanted to come back. So like I had always known what I wanted to be, but it was kind of very difficult just because like my parents had pushed this, like, you know, they had struggled all of their lives, and like this is what they wanted me to be, and this is what like was successful to them, and there was shaming involved, and there was like disappointment and like how you're not succeeding on their terms, and like even now sometimes I feel like I need their approval, or I feel like I have this need for people's approval, and what I've come to learn was like is like I'm not like defining anybody else's success. Like success in my life is like my own determination, and it's for me to uphold. And even after this project, like even having released Techies, my family read this, and some of my relatives were like, how could you say that about your parents? Like your parents' trials have gone to waste. And I was like, how could you say such a thing? You know, like I didn't even put anyone down. I was just telling my story. And one of my other aunties, like I have like 7 aunties, and they had like a family meeting about this. And the day before I came to visit, and I was like, oh. But she said to me, like, they can't really say anything to you. They can't put you down because it's not like you're not successful. Like if you were like doing anything else, or if you weren't making money, or if you're not successful, like they can say something to you then, but you're doing so great, and like we're all really proud of you, and like we're proud of you that you decided to go on your own. And like it was great. Like I was like, oh yeah, approval. But at the same time, like I was like, even before this, even knowing, like I'm constantly doing this myself, right? I'm constantly approving myself. Like I'm doing a good job. Look, I'm on stage. Send a picture to my mom. Hey mom. I am constantly defining what I need to do next, and even if like I mean, I don't think perfection is real. I don't think perfection exists. Like you can strive for perfection, but if you find yourself as perfect, that doesn't mean like that means you've decided that there's no growing anymore, and you lack humility in that case, and like you're conceding to like not growing anymore. So I always think there's somewhere to grow and somewhere to go forward. So always self-defining.
Tim, let's talk about Fall Out Boy.
Hook
I'm
a
just
girl up
kidding.
with some murder?
We're not going to talk about Fall Out Boy.
Let's
Um,
not.
You've brought up challenges around being vulnerable, both as
Yeah.
a tech employee and just a man in general.
Right.
How has opening up, both in this project and in general, been helpful to you professionally?
I think we can start pretty far back, actually. I was an immigrant with family. Well, I was born in the Philippines around the time of extreme political strife, like 1984. And in 1986, there was this massive people power revolution. You know, the kind of thing where you have tanks on the street. And like, my parents were routinely fighting for the freedom to take their country back. And in the meantime, I was like in the sidelines. At one point, they like tied me to a tree to kind of make sure that I didn't get away. The way that you would do like a dog in Hayes Valley or something. I don't. What it ended up becoming was an extreme amount of pressure for me to do something as great and as brave as what they did. When my parents moved to New Jersey, I was an outsider in every way. I was the only brown kid in town. I mean, there was like one black kid in school, and he and I were friends, and that was it. It became a game for me to be a chameleon and see how many different ways people can perceive me. And it became a lifelong social experiment. How many ways can I figure out like who I am? Am I a musician? Am I a varsity soccer player? Am I a mathlete? I was all of these things. I won all the spelling bees, but I wasn't like, I was like the consummate nerd, but also like the jock, but also like the artist. And I would get made fun of on the soccer field and like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna paint some flowers? I'm like, I might. I mean, you don't know. And then like I won some art shows and it's like what do I really wanna do? And, you know, you get all this pressure from your parents to be like, oh, you have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer, you gotta be like this amazing thing, live up to your family name. For context, my great-grand-uncle was the 6th president of the Philippines. So like just even that gave me immense like personal pressure. Now I'm straight and I have this like masculinity that I'm like trying to defend. And the entire time, I'm not allowed to be vulnerable. I'm not allowed to be scared. I'm not allowed to question my decisions because I have to be strong. I have to stand with conviction on what I believe. I can't second guess them. And then I was engaged. I was about to be married. And then for the first time in my life, everything was clicking. And then we broke up. We never got married. And then it was just like a cascading waterfall of everything that I'd second guessed before just followed. And I realized the entire time that I wasn't letting myself be vulnerable, it was pushing it to the side. I was just like, it's like climbing up this wall and I just setting myself up for a huge fall. And I had to turn my life around. I had to figure out like, if I was gonna be a design leader, if I was gonna manage a team at Facebook, and if I was gonna have some real connections and really like value the people that are close to me and have intense, amazing collaborations at work, doing the work that I love, I needed to be vulnerable. I needed people to see who I was and like have my emotions be congruent to like what's happening in the situation. It could be as simple as saying, I think we need to call this meeting because I'm hungry and I don't want to be mad at you because I'm hungry. You know, just like giving yourself that extra 5 minutes to say, I'm low on blood sugar. Could be the difference between me saying like, I think you're completely wrong, and then just stomp out, you know, and get a sandwich. It's difficult being, I know that like as a person of color, I have like a lot of assumptions about the kind of person I am, but I also still struggle with like the straight male, you know, sensibilities and all the pressures that come from that.
I will open ourselves up to questions from the audience / Jesse via Slack. I also have questions too.
All right, so to the entire panel, how did you get your foot through the door, and what do you suggest to junior designers who are in a similar place trying to be a part of the tech community in Silicon Valley?
Whoever wants to volunteer.
I've got a really funny story around that. I don't think I've ever told this publicly. So I moved to Japan when I graduated high school, just up and left. And while I was in Japan, how I got into tech in product design and product management, I was in Japan, and I had seen that there was this beta program called fried green director files, essentially. So this is pre-Shockwave, pre-Flash. And here, this is going to really date me. The only way to communicate during those days was via fax.
Yeah.
In Japan, of all places, right? So the kind of fax paper that curled up.
What's up?
Exactly. It's pterodactyls in your stomach. And so I had sent this fax in saying, and it was basically saying that I had seen someone in the press talk publicly about a beta program that should not have been spoken about. And this is before you actually had password sites for beta testing. And so they were like, oh, wow, who's this person in Japan that speaks Japanese and knows director really intimately? I was at Wired magazine at the time as an art director. And that's basically how I got my foot in the door with the tech industry. And then ended up leading a team in Japan and being relocated here to San Francisco, which is actually how I ended up coming back here through the Macromedia days as one of the original founders of Macromedia Japan. But you got to hustle. I mean, you've got to find your way, as Jeany was saying as well. Look at the world with your head tilted to the side. Look at the world with your eyes closed. And, you know, will that door through grit and tenacity to open up.
For me, what I did was like I was flying back here every month, just going to design events like AIGA and like San Francisco Design Week, and I would have like business cards and like resumes on hand, and just like meet people, just straight like introduce myself and connect and network. And I also like changed my phone number. I had like Google Voice, and like I changed my phone number from like a 713 number to like a 650 like San Mateo, San Francisco, so nobody knew that I wasn't actually like in state, and I was just at every single.
Still a thing? I guess it is.
It is still a thing.
Wow.
I still have that phone number. I would just come and like just it's a straight hustle, just like talk to everyone, and like eventually they'll bite. I used to like send like cold LinkedIn requests, like do what LinkedIn recruiters do now, but like reverse, just like shoot out emails at like LinkedIn recruiters and like, hey, I'm looking for a job, and like this is my portfolio. I eventually got a job at like PlayStation that way, which was really cool, and like through these networks, like I got like agency jobs, and then like through LinkedIn, I got a job at LinkedIn, like an internship even. But you just straight hustle the way through, and like just like Anna said, you just will the door open.
Don't expect it to be dropped in your lap, and don't expect it to be handed to you. You really have to kick ass.
Sure.
Yeah.
I could do a Fall Out Boy story now. I think this is like the right time.
I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah. I mean, as like an angsty 18-year-old, I just graduated from high school, and I knew like my days as a musician were winding down because I wanted to like double down on art school, but at the same time I had no money to go to these shows. Tickets, even if they were like 15 to 20 bucks, I still couldn't afford them. So in my head, I'm like, how do I get into a show without paying for it? Well, maybe if I'm with the band, but not like really with the band. Like I'm not performing with them, but like maybe if I make their stuff, I can design their shirts, sure. I started doing that, and I figured out that the Fall Out Boy is being represented by Crush Management in New York, and I was like, through a friend of a friend, introduced to somebody there, and I was like, hey, if you guys need any merch designed, I'm your guy. I started doing that, and it wasn't too long before they were like, okay, so there's this thing called MySpace. We have our music on there, but we want our music on our website too. I think we want more people on our website the way you do on MySpace. I'm like, all right, you know what you want. And they asked me if I could build them a music player. And as the guy who just wanted to hustle, of course I said yes. I didn't know how to do it. So in a span of a weekend, I taught myself everything about Flash, and never looked back.
I think for me, it was probably through stalking.
Going throughout all of these.
I was, I was fortunate enough to go to, an art school, so I was exposed to a lot of designers in the area. I went to CCA, which is just down the street, and there were a few companies at the time that I was, really excited to want to work for. I think at the time it was Meta Design and Method, and I was studying graphic design at the time. And every year the AIGA has Portfolio Day, so they do reviews and all these people come, and I made sure to try to get in front of those folks and brought my super shitty portfolio and presented it to both Method and Meta Design and a few others. And I think during that day there were a couple of people that they kind of randomly assign you, but I somehow managed to. I lucked out and got Meta Design and Method, but before those interviews, I had talked to somebody else. I can't remember who it was actually now, but the person had told me, it was like, oh, you should really make your portfolio look like portfolios from the Academy of Art. So my portfolio was like wire bound, like super basic, and if you look at portfolios from the Academy of Art, they're like gorgeously like bound, like hardcover, like this thick. Mine was like this thin. So I was a little discouraged at that point. But when I interviewed with Connor from Meta Design, I guess he just saw something that he was excited about, and that was how I got my first internship out of college.
I did not know you were a Meta Design alumni.
Yes.
So am I.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Friendship. To the whole panel, can you point to a specific time where you made a design decision that was informed by your unique perspective that others may not have been able to make?
I must want to ask that question once more.
Can you point to a specific time where you made a design decision that was informed by your unique perspective that others may not have been able to make?
A good way to rewrite, or I'll ask the same question a different way.
Yes.
How do your backgrounds and perspectives inform your work?
Is this work?
Anyone.
I guess, I'll
yeah, go
say
ahead.
a little bit something about PS4. Myself and my team were chosen for that particular project, not because we were gamers, but because we were coming in from a pure design perspective. And knowing that the PS3 and the cross-media bar really was archaic and needed to be blown up and redesigned. And I think it was the fact that we were leveraging our own lives and the way we lived, that we're not coming from the really closeted gamer, like just intense gamer perspective, I think allowed us to deliver something that was refreshing to that platform.
When I was pitching a deck for Facebook Music early last year, I realized that most keynote presentations at Facebook are pretty vanilla. It's like, literally a white background and some black text. And I knew that if I wanted people to really believe in the vision that we had laid out, they needed to hear some music. And then not just hear music, but like also see the product and everything that we wanted to build, just like the entire sensory experience. And it wasn't too long after I put together that deck that we got PMs and engineers and engineering managers on board. And finally, Zuck saw it and he said, yeah, it's time. I think we should do this. And at the end of the day, somebody came back and said, Zuck wanted to know what that song was. It was like a friend of mine in Philadelphia, the band called Cruiser. The song was called Go For It. It was really cheesy, like very poppy, very upbeat, the kind of thing you would hear at a commercial. But my experience designing music products for those bands helped me make that decision.
I think for me, it really affects day-to-day designing because, you know, I've sat in a lot of design presentations, and you see mocks and prototypes and things like that, and you start to notice that even details such as profile pictures and fake names and things like that all come from a very specific perspective, usually white American names. So it's like the default name is like John Smith, and then the default profile picture is, you know, like a white guy when he's attractive.
Appleseed.
Yeah, Johnny Appleseed. Yeah. And so you start to notice that, you know, there's this like this viewpoint that isn't even being represented on just everyday mocks. And so, you know, in my own work, like I try to make sure to include like even just fake names that are more diverse, more typical, especially in the Bay Area, with super long names, and showing like profile pics that just like are more representative, I think, of the world. So I think that's just like one small way that I think my work is affected, because I was just more aware of that inherent bias of how even just like fake design mocks show bias.
I think when you work for a tech company, like you get into the nitty-gritty, and sometimes you forget like your passion for design or your passion for the love of what you do, because you're doing like iterations and iterations and iterations of something, and like sometimes it becomes like grunt work, like oh, I have to change the copy like for the millionth time, like this is like the millionth meeting I've had, you know, and sometimes you forget like this is the job that you wanted to do, and like I was really passionate about this, and I've been passionate about this, and you forget. But like what I love the most about design is like when you get those like brand new projects, when it's like a new thing and it's like amorphous and like you're still trying to figure it out, like, and I love those things. I love those challenges that you need to face, and like you dive in head first, and like one of the biggest things is like just taking your passion and like carrying it forward. The other thing for me is like taking risks. When I worked at LinkedIn, it was like one of the hardest things to do. I worked on the homepage team, so it was like really hard to change, just because like revenue comes into play, like ad space, like all of these things are like important to the like business and how much money they make. And so like changing like a product like that is really difficult. And like it's also really scary to like pitch ideas and like get shot down, like knowing that you're like 90% going to be shot down. But like my, I guess, like experience in like taking risks, I feel like you kind of have to do it and kind of have to push the bounds. Like I pitched tons of random ideas, and like sometimes you like push the weirdest ideas, and like they say like no risk and no reward, right? So from pushing that, like we did like make pushes on the homepage, like that new homepage is like from like pushing the boundaries. So yeah, like push the boundaries, I guess.
Great. We have time for a couple more questions. Next one. Have there been any books, poems, or novels, and I'm going to extend it to movies, video games, any non-professional experiences of yours that have inspired your work? Fallout Boy.
I mean, yeah.
I'm also a big nerd and a big gamer.
Yeah.
What's your favorite game?
What's my favorite game? That's a tough question. Journey. I love Journey.
Damn it,
It's
she stole what I was gonna say.
Yeah, sorry.
I totally was gonna say that.
Yeah.
All right, I'll have that.
Okay, so two nerdy things, I guess, or maybe three. So I love video games just because, like, just storytelling. It's story told in a different way, and it's like a medium of craft that's totally different. And I like it. You can go down to like the user experience of it, or like just the visuals, or like the story of it. It's a whole different medium, and it's like inspiring. You know, like we're all working on products, and it's all kind of similar. We're trying to tell a story. We're trying to build the best user experience, and they're all very similar to each other. They're just applied a little differently. The audience is a little different, so those are quite inspiring. recently, so on a different note, recently I took a class from Ash Thorpe. I don't know if you guys know who that is. He does like UI for Ender's Game. He does like movie UI, so like the cool Iron Man stuff, but
Like
that's
Medal
not
of
his.
Honor or something?
Yeah, he did Medal of Honor. He also does like Person of Interest, like opening
That's right.
titles. Yeah, he does like opening titles. And like I took his class, and like this guy's like phenomenal, and I'm like, holy crap, like there's no way I'll like be ever this good. And like watching him go through his process, it's pretty much like our process, like design process. They go through the same thing, just a little differently. And like throughout the process, he would be like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like we would go through Cinema 4D, and he's like, yeah, I just am fucking around. And I'm like, oh, that's me too. I do that at work too. I'm just like fucking around, don't know what I'm doing either. But you're great at what you do. And basically, he just like keeps pushing things out, like keeps putting things out there, and like experiments with weird things, and like you just like eventually create something that's like awesome, or like you run with this idea that's really cool. And like it's just a really inspiring process, and his stuff is like so crazy phenomenal, but like the thinking process like in the roots is still the same. And so like that has really been inspiring, and like this guy has like been put on a pedestal, but like when you talk to him, it's like just normal. He's just another guy like doing the same thing as us. Yeah.
I think I have a few books that were inspiring. The first one is probably the first design book I read in high school that was given to me by a teacher, and it was called The Non-Designer's Design Book, which was pretty awesome because they had this very memorable acronym called CRAP. So contrast, repetition, association, and proximity. And I still remember it decades later. So that was pretty inspiring of a design book, even though when I look back at the book now, like the visual design of it is actually very bad. But, and then I would say I was also really inspired by Paul Rand. He had written several books. Design, Form, and Chaos is probably the most inspiring book that I can think of off the top of my head for me.
I looked at 3 different interesting areas recently. I was going to say Jeany. Actually, not being a gamer, as I mentioned, I have a deep admiration and respect, having worked in the game space now for a while, of what goes into this, having toured all the worldwide studios inside of Sony. So Polyphony Digital does Gran Turismo, to Media Molecule that's in London, there's Little Big Planet and the upcoming PS4 title Dream, to the God of War team at Santa Monica Studios, to Naughty Dog with Uncharted. And Jeany was incredibly moving, and some of my friends created that game. Tina was the producer for it, a good friend of mine. And they have an upcoming title that, if you haven't played Jeany, you should definitely check out. It's called Abzu, which means deep blue, essentially, or open blue. And it's an exploratory underwater game where you're swimming with gigantic whales and sharks. It's just free exploration. So for me, I'm looking forward to that. That's one way I sort of look at inspiration, is the indie game scene in particular, which not a lot of people know about. There's a conference that happens once a year in Kyoto, and it's usually like, I'm gonna get this wrong, it's like May, June, July-ish timeframe. It's called Bit Summit, and if any of you have a chance to go check that out, please do your Sherpa exploration, go to it, especially this year, because it's gonna be bigger than ever with Nintendo coming in as the sponsor. Indie video games, cooking, culinary. I really get inspired by playing and potentially taking my own life into my hands with sous vide. I've got a crazy laboratory polyscience device. And for me, looking at and just saying, we're going to make a dinner based off of colors or different ingredients, whatever we have in the refrigerator, that's interesting. And then coming back to the book topic, I really have probably 2 books that I always go back to, and they're really boring. One is Josef Müller-Brockmann's Grid book system, and then also the compendium of Wolfgang Weinert, and just the collective works that he's done over the years. And there was one book that I really am sad that still has not been published, and it's kind of like urban lore in San Francisco. There's an incredible designer that if you don't know of her, you have to seek out everything she's ever done, and that's Jennifer Sterling. She's an amazing letterpress, metal stamp designer. Her work is in the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum. and she was going to produce a book by Ginkgo Press, and that never got published for some weird reason. And so just consume everything you can that you can find of hers, for sure.
Oh, professionally, I would say Drive by Daniel Pink. It wasn't until I read that book that I started to really focus on level of autonomy, mastery, and purpose in my work. And all three of those things combined brought me the most happiness in what I do. Outside of work, I would say, since we're talking about video games, I spent a lot of time playing World of Warcraft. And yeah, World of Warcraft, and almost flunked out of college because of it, because I was managing a guild of 60 people, and when you're managing that many people, children and adults, and trying to lead a raid of 40 people against this dragon, you need to be very, very good at being patient, at commanding, and also making sure that everyone has the same expectations, and also being very aware of everyone's mood, everyone's emotions. Our tension's rising. Have you not eaten enough? Maybe we need to take a pizza break.
Recurring topic there.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of food,
very important. Mood swing.
Speaking of snacks.
Yeah.
I've been very. I've been also really spending a lot of time cooking. So the latest has been the Food Lab by Kenji. I just love the intersection of science and food.
All right, let's do lightning round, and I'd love to hear from Helena this time as well. So, lightning round, because we have snacks after this, and I know that you all love snacks, and I'm sure that you all love snacks. What, to you, is the future of diversity in tech? What do your dreams look like? That was an actual sentence that somebody wrote, and I loved it.
Me first, huh? Okay. It's hard for me to articulate my dreams, but I'm still kind of in first step mode of awareness, which was just a huge reason for doing this project, where many, many people in this room have no idea that any of this is even a thing, and that's totally normal because you haven't been through it, and that's okay. But as of now, prior to now, and even still now, a lot of conversations around diversity and what specific types of people are facing in the industry, it's pretty siloed. It's like diversity conversations talking to people having diversity conversations, and it never makes it outside of that world. And so there's this challenge of, how do we get this conversation to go outside of those bounds? How do we get people who have historically never been affected by this to understand that it does affect them, maybe not directly, but from a business standpoint, or your product is only designed for 22-year-old white boys, or whatever. So that's kind of the challenge that I see that is really step one, but just absolutely gigantic. And so that's kind of, that's what I like to see. And as someone who used to work in tech and felt super isolated, and I know all these people on stage and many people in the audience have also felt really isolated in the industry, I would like everybody to find each other and to not feel so alone and not feel like they're the only person who is from where they're from or has been through what they've been through, because it's very common, but we don't talk about it and we all just kind of stew on our own experiences. So I think awareness and just finding each other and sharing our stories is a really nice dream to realize.
I'd like to see tech being offered as not just the solution for success for folks who don't come from privilege. I see a lot of efforts to that present tech as tech will save you, and I don't think that's necessarily the case for a lot of people. So I definitely think it's an option, and I wanted to see it as like one of many options. I get frustrated when, like I fall into this trap too. I'm like, just learn HTML, and I tell my friends like, just learn HTML, like be a web dev, and then I have to step back and be like, actually, maybe that's not what they're interested in, or maybe that's not what they would be good at. So I think there are many roads to success, and tech is just one option. And we should try to remember that, like, to present as many options to people as possible.
Yeah,
We do.
mics.
Okay, that's right.
I guess aside from dealing with the day-to-day present situation that diversity and inclusion has, both within Fortune 500 and the pervasive evilness inside of startups today, really the sort of platforming of salary generalization, making sure that salaries are refactored, leveled appropriately from the management perspective so that there is no discrepancy between men and women, because there really is a discrepancy in salaries. I've been in some really awkward conversations recently of late that puts me on the opposite side, which is pretty interesting. So that's something I really want to see changed stat. Coming back to what you just elaborated on, not pushing tech, I think that design thinking is more important than just a particular vertical discipline, like learning how to code or learning how to like do X, Y, or Z. But the whole critical thinking process that really is design thinking is really important, and that has to be just part of onboarding process if people don't know it and taught in schools. That's going to be really important for the youth, the Gen Z generation, my kids, my 3 children that I have as well, making sure that they're part of that. So those are my 2 areas I really want to see changed.
Man, I think diversity should just be a no-brainer. Like, even outside of tech, right? We're having these conversations, like in the film industry, even like diversity should just like be considered. Like right now, I feel like we're righting this wrong that's happening right now. Like that's been happening, and it's
Ghost in the Shell.
yes, I'm just thinking of Ghost in the Shell. I mean, it's just Asian representation in films. But I'm just thinking like these institutions have like existed, like these like reverse diversity like just has been in existence, and right now we're like starting to become aware, you know, like when we're like tech has been having this conversation for a little bit of a while now, and then it's starting to ripple, right? It's starting to like start conversations in other industries, and I think we're very self-aware, but I really like just wish it was like a no-brainer. Like this should have been pushed forward already. Like there's so much happening in the world like that you're just like, it's 2016, shouldn't we be further than this now? So like just beyond tech, I just wish that like we could get through this faster, you know, like inclusion is like should have always been happening, and I wish that has always been a thing.
I'm in this spot right now at work where we're trying a lot of different design tools, and as much as we've progressed, and it's at a point where we have so many tools that make it so much faster to design the products that we build today, I think it's still really hard to design in other languages. Yeah, I mean, I don't speak any other languages, and I think that's one step, so maybe I could learn other languages. I mean, I definitely dream in other languages, but that's a different story.
German text strings.
Yeah, it's strange. Like, I think I'm just abstracting things that I've heard in movies and replaying them in my dream. But I find it hard to design for other locales, design for other cultures, if I'm not able to think the way that they do. And I think that it'd be cool if design tools could help us do that.
Okay, I think we're done. Are we done?
You're done. Please get off the stage now. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Helena.